So, news. The first bit is I'm now at 6 subscribers, as opposed to 5 during my at least 2 most immediate previous recordings. So thank you to everyone who subscribed. Secondly, I said I'd look up the ETH hash, and I did. And I have nothing interesting to say about it. It is what it is. It doesn't seem realistic that you could write your own miner. So I won't. Thirdly, after I finished that long talk last recording about the Bitcoin hash, I mentioned something randomly offhand, and that was in some random two-set violin video. They said that if, during the Rite of Spring, if you're sitting in front of the bassoon and you're listening to their entrance, when they enter for the famous solo at the beginning on a C, it's a C5, I believe. The entrance is very rough usually. It's, and in my recollection, it really isn't that rough when you try to do that. So, in a couple minutes before recording this, I experimented with the, Rite of Spring entrance a little bit, and I'm going to test how much I can stress out my microphone with some example entrances on that high C. Was there any garbling or roughness or... maybe I should turn the background music off on the, game first. Okay. Hear a little roughness there. There we go, more. If I do a really soft pianissimo entrance, you get a little bit of fuzz before the attack. If I go hard on it, it attacks immediately. So, I guess I would expect of my professional bassoonists, if they were playing that solo, to be able to hit that note without garbling beforehand. So maybe, I don't want to be too insulting, but the bassoonist that two-set violin knows may be a little bit, not the best at their reed making when it comes to making reeds that allow for clean attacks on C5s. Yeah. And I haven't been practicing that a whole lot. Yeah, it goes to a A. Well, I need to practice that more. Coordination. Anyway, just some experimenting there. Okay, so settled that whole attacks on C5 on bassoons things. Now to more important technical stuff. I'll turn the music back on. I figured out why, if you record videos using NVIDIA GeForce Experience, the file size is so large. And it's really simple, and I don't know why I didn't come up with this earlier. It's But, well, I actually do know why. It's because I'm new to this. There's, I guess, a little bit too much information to take in that I have time for. I'm willing to take in all at once. But it's because the bitrate's so high. So, if I record using NVIDIA GeForce Experience, the video will come out on the laptop on which I'm recording right now, 1080p 60 Hz, with a bitrate of over 8,000 kilobits per second, or 8 megabits per second. The settings that I had going in OBS were 1080p 60 Hz, with a bitrate of only 2.5 megabits per second. So I was recording less than a third the bitrate, and so I was getting files that were less than a third the file size. Now that would mean that the picture quality on these low bitrate videos, it would be rather poor. That being said, though, might get more onto this later. My upload speed for the internet that I have is abysmal. It only goes up to 5 kilobits per second. And so, it's not very feasible. It creates a big upload bottleneck to upload videos that have a bit rate of 8 kilobits per second, especially if they're an hour long. Those can get up to 6 gigabytes in size and can take up to a week to upload. So my current upload speed situation, it doesn't make any sense to try to upload videos with that high of a bit rate. And I believe in NVIDIA GeForce Experience you can't actually change the bit rate in the settings, and so it's always going to record the highest bit rate it possibly can to get the highest quality it possibly can. Also, an issue with high file size videos is you want to back up your videos, because sometimes people's YouTube channels get accidentally just deleted for no particular reason, and you want to have an extra copy of them. So if you have high bitrate videos, they're difficult to store. I'll be buying a whole lot of $400 18 terabyte HDDs trying to store all of these videos. Now, and that kind of solves the quandary of why don't you record at a high bit rate so that maybe you can upgrade upload higher quality videos later, and then crunch down the bit rate using something like MoviePie, and then, you know, just kind of hold on to those high bit rate raw recordings and just upload final products that are lower bit rates for now until you can get faster internet. Well, again, storing those raw recordings is a pain in the butt. So I'm going to, although I'm going to take a big quality hit for these low bit rates, I'm going to continue to record at these lower bit rates. But anyway, that's why I had big file size issues, and that's why some of my videos, like Legend of Matanui Alpha, took so long to upload, and most recently, the later portions of my Matoran Adventures recordings. So Matoran Adventures take a really long time to upload as well, because they were recorded using NVIDIA GeForce Experience and were recorded at very high bit rates. So if those are really high quality in their picture, I'm emphasizing picture for now, that's why. And everything else is very low quality, that's why. Now, as I mentioned last time, if you record using, again, NVIDIA GeForce Experience, the audio quality, or the quality of my voice audio, at least in my opinion, to my discriminating ear, is very poor. It sounds like I'm talking from inside a metal trash can. And even when it's not saturating and clipping. Obviously that Kumanui episode was terrible because I was clipping, but when I'm not clipping because I turned down the settings, it still sounds terrible. And this is not the mic gain settings, this is like the digital settings. So, don't know what's going on there, but my solution is just don't record with NVIDIA GeForce Experience. And then that way you don't get large files, and that way you don't get terrible audio. Now, more on the subject of audio and render speeds and such. I have a laptop with a NVIDIA 1060 Mobile on it, with a 60Hz 1080p screen. That 1060 Mobile has a NVENC encoder, which is a hardware encoder that comes on NVIDIA GPU chips. And so, in OBS, you can actually switch between CPU encoding, x264, for which you can manually set the frame rate, to NVENC encoding, using the hardware encoder on your GPU. So I did that. I tried it. Let's try encoding videos with the NVENC encoder. And the video I'm recording right now is being recorded on the NVENC encoder. And for some reason, I don't know why, still audio quality is still an enigma to me. The audio, when you record with the NVENC encoder, comes out way better sounding than if I record using the CPU. Don't know why. Still no idea the science behind this, but it is. And of course, way better than if I record using NVIDIA GeForce Experience, where the audio is just potato quality. And of course, it still records at the bitrate settings I applied in OBS, and it records at 60 Hz 1080p. So that's what I'm going with for now. Now you might go, okay, what happens if you re-render your video using the NVENC encoder? Well, again, I'm not really willing yet to spend money on Adobe Premiere, but although it doesn't support it natively, there is a mod you can do to MoviePie to re-render videos using the NVENC encoder. Now, I always re-render because I'm required to record my audio separately so that I don't end up with imbalanced audio, voice and game audio, and sometimes I splice. So I always have to re-render everything. So I thought, well, let's try doing this mod and re-rendering on this laptop using the NVENC encoder. And now I have to go through a whole bunch of stats here. So if I run just x264 encoding on my 8th gen i7 6-core processor that's in my laptop, it goes about, for like a World's Hardest Game 3 episode, I get somewhere around 90 iterations per second, whatever that means. And for a video of, and actually write down the size, it's about an hour long. It takes about 29 minutes to perform the render, and during the render, my CPU usage, according to Windows Task Manager, which is not the most accurate thing in the world, but that's what I've got here for having a holistic one number that represents my CPU utilization. I have used the CPU at 80% utilization the whole time. The clock, although it normally runs at about 3.9 gigahertz, will thermal throttle back to 3.3 or 3.2 gigahertz soon into the rendering process. Because it's a laptop, and the cooling is poor, because that's just how it is. Laptops are thin, it's hard to get high performance cooling, so they thermal throttle often. And this 29 minutes to render takes into account that thermal throttling. Now I have a big desktop with a 10th gen i9 18 core. It's called the 10980XE. Now you would think because this thing has 3 times as many cores that it would render at approximately 3 times as fast. The problem is I guess the rendering isn't parallelizable enough to utilize all that, so it doesn't actually go 3 times as fast. In fact, it doesn't even go twice as fast. It just goes about 50% faster. So you get somewhere around 130-ish iterations per second on that. So that only takes about 20 minutes to do. Which, okay, that's better, right? And my CPU utilization is only 40%. And as I said last time, what's the core? I actually run core temp on that. I've done the renders while core temp is running and giving me the stats, and the hottest core, according to core temp, however accurate that is, during this rendering process gets up to 62C. And I managed to maintain clock speeds of about 4.4 gigahertz. So that's more like information on that. That's using a Corsair H100i Pro, which is a 2400 RPM fan, 120 by 240 millimeter radiator, all-in-one liquid cooler. using Corsair fans, of course, because they come with it. So I'm not paying attention to the game very well because that's not really what's important here. And the clocking is decided just by AI overclocking with the Asus motherboard, which I've heard on Reddit that has a tendency to apply excessive core voltages. So manually reducing the core voltages is worthwhile. That might be the reason why I can get the CPU get so hot. Get into that later. But I'm not really interested in system crashes, and it seems to work okay. In fact, I would even enable the overclocking, except that you can't actually, as far as I can tell, you can't enable XMP, which stands for Extreme Memory Profile, unless you actually go to AI overclocking mode, and I would want to enable XMP because my memory is 3600 megahertz, and I'm not going to get the performance gain of that 3600 megahertz RAM unless I enable XMP. Anyway, so I get 4.4 gigahertz, which is pretty high clock for that CPU. I managed to maintain it through the entire rendering process. My single core Cinebench score for it was 1194, and multi-core is 25505, and that multi-core Cinebench score is amazing, so that's good. However, the TJ Max, according to Intel's website for it, which is the max junction temperature, is 86C, C standing for Celsius or centigrade, and so running at 62C is 4C below 20C below the max junction. Now, Core Temp says the max junction is 110C, but I would trust Intel's website over Core Temp. So if my max junction is 86C, I probably don't want to go within 20C of that max junction temperature, which means I don't really want to go over 66C. I didn't actually look at Core Temp while running a Cinebench because I didn't want to allocate resources to anything other than the Cinebench to get the highest score possible, but I'm going to do that later and see what the temperatures get up to running a Cinebench. But just doing a render, which is 40% utilization according to Task Manager, I get a core up to 62C, makes me a little bit disappointed with the cooling performance of my 120 millimeter rad AIO, and I'll more on that later. Anyway, if I go to, circling back to the NVENC, if I do the mod for using the NVENC encoder on my laptop, which has again a mobile 1060, and an 8th Gen 6-core i7, I don't know what the model number. The CPU names for Intel CPUs are very confusing. Then I can get up to, from about 90 iterations per second, up to 108 to 112 iterations per second, so about 20 iterations per second faster. And instead of taking about 29 minutes to complete, it takes about 24.5 minutes to complete. Get about 42% CPU utilization. The CPU runs at a full 3.9 gigahertz. And so there still uses some CPU, but it uses about half as much, and I don't thermal throttle. And I go slightly faster, but not a whole lot faster. Not as faster as the desktop with the CPU only. And then only much less CPU usage. So, if I just had this laptop, I would save render time by switching to NVENC for renders. That being said, my desktop is still faster CPU only because the CPU is sufficiently powerful so it can render faster than the NVENC on the 1060, and so it's still worthwhile to use the desktop for renders. Now, what you would think would be really great, and I don't know if this is true, it depends on how fast the NVENC is compared to that high-end CPU. What if I can get NVENC encoding going on my desktop? Well, you know where that's going. Yes, that would be ideal. So, as far as CPU hardware encoding on the desktop, so Both AMD GPU, I would of course only have a placeholder GPU. It's a 710 in there, which I got for $35 off of Newegg. By the way, that's cheaper than $52 from Micro Center. So if you're looking for, although Newegg for online retailers has notoriously high margin, so things on Newegg tend to be pricier than say Best Buy or Micro Center. But you can find good deals sometimes, and I got a good deal on compared to Micro Center at least, on a placeholder GPU. So Newegg is good for things that are on sale at Newegg. Things that are regularly priced on Newegg that's not the best price you can get usually. You could get a good price on Lian Lancool 2 mesh performance case. $90, $10 shipping on Newegg. So some things are good. You make sure you shop around though for computer parts. Anyway, I was going to talk about hardware encoding. AMD and NVIDIA GPUs do have a built-in hardware encoder. The NVENC one and the NVIDIA ones, as far as I can tell, people say is much better. So you have one called the VEC encoder in the just a VEC encoder in AMD GPUs, and you have an NVENC encoder in NVIDIA GPUs. The NVENC one performs better and is faster. So for hardware encoding, you really want to go for NVIDIA, although AMD also works. And both are supported by OBS. I don't know if you can mod MoviePy though for either one. That's an interesting question I didn't look up, but in OBS supports both. So that's the reason to get an NVIDIA GPU. So there's kind of the advantages and disadvantages of these GPUs, which are GPUs are important if you want to do content creation and YouTube videos, just in general, if you have to render them. AMD GPUs have the advantage if they have higher clock speeds. They draw less power. So, for example, AMD 6800 XT and 6900 XT GPUs only draw 300 watts, whereas NVIDIA 3080 is 320 watts and 3090 350 watt draw. And I've heard that even though pretty much most, for my setup, most PSU calculators on the internet will tell me that a 750 watt PS power supply is sufficient for my setup, adding in a 3090 GPU. A couple of them say 850 watts is so fine, and the EVGA one says that I'm going to be using 880 something watts and I need 1000 watt, but that's just the EVGA one only. And all power supply calculators overestimate and do so by a lot. So you would think my 850 watt power supply would be sufficient to power an NVIDIA 3080 or 3090. However, there are reports on the internet, and Linus Tech Tips will confirm this, that there are power there are power spikes of power draw spikes from 3080 and 3090 GPUs that will cause auto shutoffs in 850 watt power supplies, and sometimes even 1000 watt power supplies. So if you want to be perfectly safe, you should go for a 1200 watt power supply, which are hard to find in stock right now. It's hard to find anything more than an 850 watt power supply in stock, because right now computer components are all just really hard to find in stock in general. Really don't want to have to deal with buying more hard to find in stock stuff. So for me, with an 850 watt power supply, buying a 38 or 39 is a bit worrying that I have to upgrade the power supply, which is only like $200. But I've wasted my money on my previous power supply because I didn't know, because this issue didn't actually arise at the time I was buying my power supply. Nor was I really in the know. I was just using, common PSU calculating tools. I might have underbought on my power supply, which is something that's very rare. Usually people overbuy their power supplies, but I might have underbought my power supply for 3080 or 3090 GPU. Also, I said they had higher clock speeds, and they are not artificially crippled in their double precision floating point performance, as opposed to NVIDIA gaming GPUs, which is something you only care about when you're doing scientific simulation, which is something I do care about, given that it's hard to utilize because they don't have CUDA. I'll get to that later. And there is some video made by Hardware Unboxed. I haven't watched it yet. But apparently on this perfect storm where you have a low-end CPU and a high refresh rate, 180 1080p monitor, you can get a higher refresh rate, and significantly so, on a lower mid-range AMD GPU as opposed to a high-end NVIDIA GPU. In other words, NVIDIA's performance lags behind AMD's in high refresh rate, low resolution application, which is perfectly my application. But I do have a high-end CPU, so I might be out of that zone. But that's something interesting. The reason why you buy an NVIDIA one is they have a better hardware encoder. They have a better software interface. There are packages for neural nets like Python, like PyTorch or TensorFlow, that only can be accelerated with CUDA, and so they can only utilize the GPU on an NVIDIA GPU, as well as MATLAB. MATLAB for personal use is extremely expensive. It's only over $2,000 for a license, so I won't buy that. There's also more Python packages for CUDA than there are for OpenCL. Also, C++ code is much easier to write using CUDA because there's less overhead in the coding, because CUDA is an NVIDIA GPU only thing as opposed to OpenCL, which is meant to interface with all kinds of different devices. So it's much more convenient. There's also some other software, I think like Altium, which is a PCB designing software, that only use CUDA. So it's much more utilizable if you have an NVIDIA GPU. Given, though, Adobe Premiere, for example, can use both. So Adobe uses both. So there are programs that can use your AMD CPU as a hardware accelerator. And if you're only using programs that use a AMD CPU or GPU, is what I mean, as a hardware accelerator, then you can go get away with an AMD GPU. So for someone who's just editing videos in Premiere, yeah, AMD is going to work fine and great. It actually works really good. So because I want to encode, though, using the hardware encoder and recording, that tends to make me lean towards NVIDIA, and because I have an edge towards numerical simulation projects, I would want to use an NVIDIA GPU because CUDA, not because of the hardware constraints. The hardware constraints are bad on an NVIDIA GPU, but it has CUDA, and that's what's important. So, gotta get that CUDA goods. Now, actually buying one of these things, as you know, in this day and age is very difficult. And I've tried various things, but not sufficient to try to actually get a hold of one. First, because the supply the demand outdoes the supply drastically. There's a lot of scalping going on, and there's a lot of multi-GPU setups going on for things like cryptocurrency mining. So there's a lot of, once I get my GPU, I'm not going to get out of the game trying to get another one nonsense. We're all hoping that once people start getting their NVIDIA 30 series or their AMD 6000 series GPUs, that that they will they'll get out of the game and help other people allow the demand to go down, but they tend to buy more and more and more and more. People are trying to get multiples of these, which is making it extremely difficult. So the best online retailer, as I heard, tends to be Best Buy for buying these things. So I managed to, by refreshing Best Buy, often hit multiple Best Buy drops. One of them was 2 weeks and 2 days before February 25th. So that would be about February 9th. I was at home and using my potato internet connection. And because my upload speed in particular is so bad, I couldn't click through the add to cart and checkout process fast enough to really beat anybody to the punch, because these sell out in less than like seconds. So didn't work. Trying to get a 3090, that is. Get more on the models later. There's another one at the same time, the 3060 relaunch of this NVIDIA 3060 launch date on February 25th. I was at work for that one. I had a faster internet connection, but the drop was smaller, and I couldn't get anything into the cart except the ROG Strix, and I couldn't check out with that either. The next one happened Friday, March the 12th, and I missed it. I know it was there because there were scars on the Best Buy website indicating there was a drop in the past. Right, the more info buttons were lingering, and on the unofficial Micro Center Discord and the EVGA forums or message boards, people were talking about it. So I know it happened, but I missed it entirely. But I did learn, though, that if you sometimes you manage to add a GPU to the cart, but fail to check out with it on Best Buy. In that case, it'll actually stay in your cart unless you delete it. Now, I've always just deleted it out of the cart for organization purposes. However, someone said that if you leave it in the cart, then when there's a drop, you can just go straight to checkout and you can skip the add to cart process. So now I know that, but I don't have anything in my cart right now, so so next time there's a drop, if I fail to check out, at least I know to leave stuff in my cart to manage to get in the cart. So I am a noob at this and don't know all the tips and the tricks, and have so far failed, although I managed to kind of time 3 Best Buy drops, try to take advantage of 2 of them. I'm 0 for 2 or 0 for 3 on Best Buy, trying to get one of these GPUs. Next to online retailer is Newegg, and when it comes to water blocks, I'll come up with Newegg later. Newegg isn't the most ideal because they tend to they have high margins, so their GPUs tend to be more expensive, and they tend to sell more expensive board partner models as well. So they're more expensive for multiple reasons. So not the best buy. Best Buy truly is the best buy for GPUs right now. They used to just drop things, and I used to try to take advantage of that, but even when I used Apple Pay, and they would drop every hour and half hour in the afternoons, 2 Pacific time to about 5 Pacific time. So every hour and a half hour, I would check on my phone for Newegg drops, and then I would try to pay using Apple Pay. And I would almost, because Apple Pay is only one button, and always it would get stuck in processing and not go through. And this wasn't the bank fraud alerting, it was just people were hitting Apple Pay so fast that only so many people who hit Apple Pay managed to get it, and I was just a little too slow. And then they went on to like a raffle system, which is fine, I guess, but it's easy to take advantage of it by making multiple accounts using multiple email addresses and credit cards. So it's really easy to game that kind of system. I know Newegg claims they have ways of dealing with it, but they can't. It's way harder to deal with than Newegg thinks. And I haven't been able to win any of them, even though I've signed up for pretty much all but 2 of those that had GPUs in it, and all the GPUs in the shuffle. The 2 I missed is because that day at work I had meetings over that time. I used to gotta go to meetings, so haven't been able to get anything through the shuffle. Third way is Micro Center. Now, Micro Center is annoyingly random about their drop times. So it is absolutely impossible to figure out if the Micro Center is going to have stock before you get there, even if you do take precautions like following the unofficial Micro Center Discord. So you have no idea what day to show up. The day before I recorded this, yesterday of now, the 12th, they had 22 3090 EVGA FTW3 Ultras dropped, and up to the 60th person in line at store opening got a card. I didn't choose that day because I didn't know that was a good day to choose. There's no way to find out beforehand, and so I missed out. I could have easily gotten a card if I would have waited in the line that morning. So I don't have to miss work to wait in line at the Micro Center, which is nice. However, and I've tried doing this 3 times. First time there were no cars. The second time there were cars, but I was too far back in line because I didn't show up early enough. The third time there were no cards as well. If I manage to canvas it, so wait in line for the Micro Center every day for 2 weeks straight, there's a 100% chance one of those days there's going to be a card. So I can actually guarantee it. But there's a huge cost to doing this. The nearest Micro Center to me is one of the most difficult ones to actually get a card out of because it's so far from all the other Micro Centers. You can probably tell where I live by me saying that. And it's an hour and 15 minutes away, which for me costs about $20 in gas round trip to get to. So if I canvas Micro Center for 2 weeks, that's like $200 in gas. In addition, it's very difficult for me to... I'm not a very good sleeper. It's very difficult for me to sleep in foreign and alien environments that are noisy, have a lot of street lights around, and so anything that's not the place I usually sleep in the position I usually sleep in. And so when I try to do things like wait in line in front of a Micro Center all night, I lose tremendous amounts of sleep. And this makes me perform on my day job poorly the next day and then on to the day after that. So it's kind of dangerous, and there's a huge, basically just a huge performance on work cost, sleep cost, health cost, money cost. And so it's really hard for me to canvas Micro Center. And it's just very difficult for me to do this in general. Although I've tried it a few times, it's extremely hard for me to do this to try to get a good GPU for my computer. So I'm 0 out of 3 for that. And then you can also get on EVGA's waitlist, and EVGA has a cult following, and they claim that they always make the best products. And I am on EVGA's waitlist for all their SKUs except the Hydro Coppers because I haven't relit the light for that yet, and the Kingpin because I'm not an elite member on their forums. I am a member, but I haven't posted anything, so you have to get to 100 posts before you can buy a Kingpin. That's the silliest thing ever, but it is true. I don't really want a Kingpin anyway. I don't want to spend that kind of money. So what's going on with that is, I didn't get in on that very early because I didn't start building my PC, my big desktop PC, until November. And if you're not getting into those queues a few minutes into after the queue was started, then that was a game effect. Then you're going to be waiting several months before you actually get to you. That you only actually get to you in the queue. Now, I did manage to get in to the 3060 queues about a half hour after they started, so 35 minutes after the queue launched. But those are moving pretty fast. So the $390 SKU 3060, they're already at 17 minutes after launch after 2 weeks, and I'm 27 minutes after launch after 2 weeks, and I'm 35 minutes after launch. So you would think another week or two they'd get to me, but sometimes those queues launch really fast at the start because of the initial stock, and then they slow down considerably after that. So it may not actually be 1 or 2 weeks before they get to me. The reason why it was so hard to get into the queue was because the website tends to crash, like right at the time it starts, the website tends to crash when the queue goes live. Now, people have a way to get around that, and that is URL guessing, but I didn't know that at the time. So, I couldn't get in until the website was cleared up, and there was a Best Buy drop happening at the same time, which was distracting me. And so those two things made it so I didn't get into the queue until 35 minutes after the queue launch. And using tricks like direct URL guessing for the auto-notify page allowed people to get in a minute after launch. So, now I know the tricks, but I didn't at the time, and so I was way behind on that queue when it launched. That's the one that's... it's possible I could actually get that card in 1 or 2 weeks. If not that one, the FTW3 Ultra 3090 queue would be the next most likely to get to me. But because I didn't start building my PC until late, didn't understand that some SKUs on the queue don't move, you need to sign up for all of them, didn't understand what card I really wanted and to sign up for all of the cards, I didn't get into some of those queues until as late as January 8th. And that's way too late for most of them. So it would be months or maybe years. It won't actually be years, but like at the rate they're going, it'll be years for most of those cards. So the demand is so high. I noticed on Twitter people demanding of retailers like Newegg to do like a waitlist or queue system. The demand exceeds the supply to such an extreme degree that the queue system, if it were launched, if you wouldn't get in the first like minute after it's launched, you would be waiting months until you'd actually get to you in the queue. The demand explains the supply so much that no matter what you would do, people would get hosed. There's just not enough cards to go around. Anyway, so I've tried the EVGA queue, I've tried Best Buy, I'm trying Newegg continuously, I've tried Micro Center. It's just, I'm trying these things, but I'm not very good at this game because I'm new to it, because I'm new to the GPU scene. I wasn't around during the 1080 mess. So, I'm not doing very well at getting hard to find tech products. And honestly, you shouldn't have to do this. You shouldn't be releasing a product and discontinuing your previous line of products before you have enough supply to actually feed the demand for your new line of products. And that's an interesting question. It's like, can you get a used 2080 Ti? And the answer is not for a reasonable price right now. I missed the flash selling of the 2080 Ti's as well because I started building my PC after that was happening. So I think I missed that $500 2080 Ti era as well. So previous generation GPUs are also a no-go. Anyway, so can't get a GPU for the desktop, so that's why I'm not recording on it, and that's why I'm using like a 710 as a placeholder to get screen output, but monitor output. But that's why I'm not recording on it, or can't render using NVENC with it. So that's what's going on there. And the task of getting a GPU for that computer is very draining, and I don't really have resources to help it's very difficult for me to actually pull it off. In addition, I don't have any friends or family that are into PC gaming, and so I don't have any of them that are really supportive and are trying to get cards along with me, or a card along with me, so they don't really help me out doing things like waiting in line in front of Micro Center or checking Best Buy. That's okay. I mean, it's a lot of work, and there's a lot of cost to help me for it too. It literally makes sense if they also are trying to get graphics cards to PC game themselves. So, because I don't have any friends, and because I don't have any family, that makes it more difficult for me than some other people to try to get these things. I mean, I have friends and family, it's just they're not into buying GPUs, and so they're not also trying to buy GPUs with me, and so they're not empathizing, they're not helping me out. It would be nice, though. And it would be a huge request. It's very demanding to try to help me get GPUs. Or, not plural, a GPU. So, it looks like the most likely GPU for me to get as soon as the soonest is a 3060, which is from the EVGA queue. Now, for 1080p high refresh rate gaming, a 3060 is very sufficient for that. And so for recording Bionicle games at 1080p, Yeah, like, that's perfectly fine. That'll work very well for that. It also has 12 gigabytes of VRAM, which would be good for some scientific simulation stuff. It also wouldn't cause power supply issues, like a higher-end card like a 3080 or 3090 might. So, there's some good things about getting a 3060. That being said, there's a term in the tech world like it's future-proof, which is kind of a misnomer. But if I had a 3090 GPU, that would have twice as much VRAM, which would be twice as useful. For scientific simulation purposes, I might be able to actually do some day job stuff with it if I had got a 24 gigabyte GPU. And it would allow me, if I wanted to upgrade to, say, a 4K monitor later, because I decided, I don't know, I'm tired of this graininess, and I want maybe a refresh rate hit for more higher resolution. I could then do 4K if I wanted to, or if I wanted to plug my computer into a 4K TV or something. The issue there being I probably always only record at 1080p, so then I'd be downsampling on recording, and then my refresh rate for recording would be limited by my monitor refresh rate. So, and my GPU refresh rate, and if I'm doing low refresh rates at 4K, then my refresh rate at 1080p recording will be limited by that refresh rate at 4K. So, whereas if I'm doing 1080p and I can do higher refresh rates, I might be able to record at higher refresh rates should I so desire. So, it's sort of but my monitor right now is 1080p, so if I buy a GPU that's good benchmark scores compared to others at 4K, like a 3090, it's going to be kind of wasted on that monitor. I would buy it for other reasons, and possibly for upgrade potential on the monitor later. And like I said, with AMD, the 3090 may not actually be the best performing GPU for 1080p at higher refresh rates. It might be an AMD GPU. The 3090 doesn't have anything special about it at low resolutions, only at higher resolutions when it comes to gaming. Okay, so one of this scientific simulation stuff. So I had this other YouTube channel. I call it Sked Math. So SCEDMATH. And it's kind of a dead project. I haven't uploaded anything to it recently, nor recorded anything for it recently. And it was designed, it was designed as a place where I would do things like learn particle physics and I took classes in general relativity, but I could get better at solving, but I didn't do it very well. So get better at fluid mechanics, Einstein's general relativity, particle physics, thermodynamics, and such, and post my lectures of what I was learning. Not really for other people to learn from me, because I'm not really credentialed in that, but I only have a bachelor's degree. But it would help me learn, because I would be, if you explain something to other people, or you make a video that's like you were explaining to somebody, but nobody watches it, that makes it so that you can make sure you learned it well and help you learn it better. So it's basically a place for me to post lectures on technical stuff. And part of that would be simulations and say Python or Mathematica. Mathematica is pretty cheap. It's $300, a little over $300 for a perpetual license. About $78, so maybe $80 a year for a continuing license. Using tools like Mathematica, and that's the motivation for having that high-end CPU is Mathematica. You can actually utilize GPUs in Mathematica somehow. I've never seen it actually happen, though. I don't know if it can do anything symbolic in GPUs. It probably can't. So Mathematica is probably a CPU high-biased program. I just explain things I like explaining, like numerical techniques and ENM and things like that. Just for fun, right? It's just a fun channel. And I started recording circuit stuff as pilots, because I used to work as a tutor for primarily lower division electrical engineering courses, and so I have a lot of experience lecturing and explaining on basic circuits and systems topics. So I put like some videos on there, one about node voltage, one about mesh current. My first one was like on Fermat's principle. And I decided just to kind of check if there was any activity there. Again, I'm stretched way too wide and thin right now to really put any effort into that channel, so there's not going to be any videos there anytime soon. But that Fermat's principle video went from 1 view, which it had last time I checked several months ago, to 5 views. And they're like, So somebody watched this. That's interesting. I don't really recommend you watch it because it's not the same target audience as that for something like this. It's like channel news thing. There are 5 views on that. Now one of them might have been me. And one of them might have been someone I know. So there's 3 like mystery views. I expect there to only be 0 views on that channel. So I found that kind of special that there were 5 views on that video. But it'll take a while for me to really get into the numerical technique scene. Just because I don't have any time to invest in that right now. The next news thing. Channel banner drawing. I broke the ice on it. I took a canvas and I set it to the dimensions that are the best for a YouTube channel banner. Partitioned it according to how much of it would show on each type of screen that could view it, and then started the rough sketching of the painting I'm going to make as my channel banner. Nothing special, just something kind of goofy, just to practice some painting. So I broke the ice, I did something on it, but I haven't really gone very far. I just kind of did the first sketch. I haven't even finished the first sketch. So I just partitioned the canvas and started sketching. That's all I did. So it's going to be a long time before I actually finish the channel banner. Hopefully once I start getting into painting, I start figuring out how to paint faster, and then I can paint thumbnails and paint them in a reasonable amount of time. I once had like an era where I thought that I would like to do a lot of painting and had these delusions of grandeur posting on somewhere like Twitter. No, I do not have a Twitter right now. Some really cool paintings of things I've always wanted to paint, but paintings, again, I'm stretched very wide and thin. I don't really have time to invest in doing that. So that's also that also got put aside on the table, especially if I don't want to try to make a living painting. And this is digital painting, not physical painting, by the way. It wasn't clear. If I was talking about YouTube channel banners, it has to be digital painting. And so I kind of didn't lose interest, but didn't have the time to invest in learning how to digital paint. So I'm coming back to it, trying to make YouTube channel thumbnails and banners and things, but it's slow progress on that end. As I said in previous recordings, which you may or may not have watched, do have a license for Clip Studio, because Clip Studio is pretty cheap. It's only like $30. So I do have a Clip Studio license. So that's cool, I guess. That being said, there's more brute phase money spent on digital painting because you need a tablet, and my tablet costs like over $500. So there is more money in that than just simply the $30 software. Of course, Photoshop, I believe, is like $21 a month or so. So that's more expensive than Clip Studio is. I wasn't willing to invest that amount of money into this. Yeah, because I'm experiencing a lot of wide and thin issues. So, I generally lift weights on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Sundays, with in between occasionally doing something like a few pull-ups. Oh, I got finished that task. Cool. But you can usually still record on those days because it doesn't take all afternoon to do that. And I practice my bassoon, which I've only been playing for a little over a year. As you can tell, I'm not very good at it. the goal being Tuesday and on weekends. But the problem is because of this micro center shenanigans I've been doing, the Tuesdays have been dropped. But once I get my GPU, actually get back into that, and then I record on, days like Monday after I'm done deadlifting, Wednesday after I'm done pressing, Thursday, Friday, and then a little bit on weekends as well. Then I don't really have time to paint in there. Of course, I have a day job. I don't know why I went back down here. I already got these. Force of habit. Okay, I need to go the other way now. Actually, I gotta go out into the room. And of course I have life things to do. I have to pay my bills and do taxes and things. So, go shopping. So I don't really have any time to invest in things like painting. Which is kind of... I don't really have time to do anything, really. Oh, I call it bad timing. I forgot how... I did this part before, I forgot how to do it. I forgot how the timing goes for it. Okay, it's hard to enter. Seems like I gotta enter either where there's the comb or that vertically moving circle get in my way. Okay. Oh, I think that's it for the news. I do have Battle for Power recorded. I have the Mask of Light minigames recorded, with the exception of finishing Kopaka's Ice Trail, because I just kind of gave up on that during my recording session. So I have to finish that one, but then after I finish that one, those will be ready too. I haven't been uploading very frequently at the time of this recording, which will be multiple days, uploaded multiple days afterwards. There we go. Should we record multiple days after this will be uploaded multiple days after the recording, so it'd be like, well, so when this was recording, there was a lot of drought in me uploading because, again, those Matoran Adventures high bitrate files, taking a long time to upload, and, I now, like, very recently thought maybe I could just try crunching down that bitrate, but I haven't doing that. And also I gotta be careful to make sure that the college student that's still living here doesn't get upload bottlenecked because someone's uploading silly YouTube videos. So about the upload bottlenecks, so where I live, which is the only viable, with the current hardware set I have, internet setup is DSL, which in 2021 is extremely slow, and right now the service provider is AT&T. AT&T doesn't provide DSL new plans anymore, so it's obsolete. But I'm grandfathered into it, so I'm grandfathered into obsolete DSL. So how would I make it faster? There is a cable box at the end of the driveway. But the way the way that my home's set up is, that's a long way, and it requires to route the cable from there to the home. It requires me to go through somebody's access utilities, or somebody's utilities easement. So I actually have to go through the neighbor's yard. In addition to that, I have to tear up the walls of the house to put in cable ports because it doesn't have them. And I don't actually own the house, although my parents won't be living here. They're still going to own it. So I can't just be tearing up walls willy-nilly to put in internet hardware. I could consider a satellite dish, but I haven't looked into that enough. I don't know if I will or will not have to tear up the walls for that. And I don't know if that's actually going to be faster than the obsolete DSL. Another thing to think about is maybe there's a faster DSL, like maybe InfinityCast might be faster than AT&T. Well, maybe, but I don't know if I really want to work with InfinityCast. And this is difficult right here. In the World's Hardest Game 4, in level 5, this is level 4 of the World's Hardest Game 3. There's a room very similar to this, but the scissoring, the grid weave, as it's sometimes called, is spaced every other column. So in the World's Hardest Game 4, there's a similar level. There's a similar room in the last level, as opposed to the second to last level, that's easier. So the World's Hardest Game 4 is definitely a lot easier than the World's Hardest Game 3 up until you get to the last part. So even the person who developed this after the fact, I guess, decided that they wanted to make it easier next time because maybe they were tired of trying to playtest these kind of things. Still not as hard as buying a GPU, though. So, the lack of GPU is holding me up. You could also argue that the lack of sufficient internet speed or convenient ways to actually install hardware to achieve that. And of course, it's also near impossible for me to do something like Twitch stream. Not that I have really any plans to do it, but it's something that I can't really do because my internet isn't fast enough, essentially. And if I run a Google speed test, Google will actually say, your internet connection is very slow. It just straight up just gives it to me. Your internet is slow. So someone get this guy a GPU and someone get this guy a faster internet connection. It's really inconvenient when you're in college and you have to upload, like, assignments. You have to make sure that you not finish on time, but finish long enough, soon enough that you have enough time to upload it after you finished it. Really gave me problems on my grad school graduation exam or comprehensive exam. I had to take it at home because this was because of the whole disease situation at the time, and scan it in. I had to add Zoom monitoring going on, scan in my answers and upload them. And I finished the exam like over half an hour early to make sure I had time to do this. And then I had to have one of the proctors in an private Zoom room with me for half an hour while the rest of the people were finishing to wait for me to finish uploading this thing because the upload speed was so slow. So for college kids, slow internet really hurts you in a lot of ways. I'm not a college kid anymore, but it still hurts. So my contentment meter, my RPG stat for contentment right now is a bit low. Ugh. How long have I been recording? About an hour. Okay. So that'll end this recording here then. I didn't really get too far in the game. I just managed to get those 4 yellow circles that were in this region. But that's something, right? A little at a time, just keep chipping away at it. Next I have to actually get to this safe zone over here. That'll take a bit of work. I'll do it like on a day where I'm, better rested and have, more prepared to grind at something like this. And have less to say, so I can just grind. One more attempt just cuz. That seems like a good pattern right there. Okay. Try to reinforce that pattern. Yeah, okay, and then I get, there we go. Get the dip. Yeah. Okay. So work on, working that out. I got halfway there. Next time. I thought I was done, but I forgot a few things. The first thing is, actually, I looked back on the previous recording, and I thought when I recorded Lancool the game GBA with the NVENC encoder, that the audio was very good in comparison to with recording with the GPU. But it does also seem to come with its own set of issues. It appears that the NVENC encoder in real time applies a background noise suppression. And my voice could be potentially very broadband, and it's filtering out some of the percussives or consonant sounds in my voice, which is making my pronunciation sound very poor. And some words, it's hard to tell what I'm saying. So that background noise filtering might be a problem. So something for me to keep in mind. The next thing that I forgot to talk about is custom water cooling. So when I was checking Newegg late last year, I noticed that there's a listing that kind of lingered for a while on a collaboration between ASUS and EK on a pre-water blocked ASUS 3090, essentially. There was a 1 slot wide. And I had an opportunity to buy it because it lingered in stock for so long, because it was very expensive compared to other 3090s. And of course it wasn't like a scalping third-party seller. It was directly from Newegg. But the price went up for that since then. I haven't found it in stock again. And I looked at that and said, nah, I don't really want to buy that. And the reason is because it's more expensive than other 3090s. It was like $2,050. And because in order to use it, I'm going to have to make a custom water cooling loop because it's pre-water blocked. Now, very soon, I don't know when, the waitlist for the 3080 and 3090 hydro coppers from EVGA is going to go live. And hydro coppers are 1 slot wide GPUs that are pre-water blocked for use in a custom cooling loop setup where you don't have to apply a aftermarket water block, take off the old air cooler and add a new water block. It's already pre-water blocked. And this is convenient because you don't have to worry about messing up the thermal pads and stuff when you're trying to water block your CPU, or your GPU, sorry. But I also said that I was somewhat unhappy with how well my AIO is cooling my CPU. And the reason why I chose such a small AIO is because I have a Lian Lancool 2 mesh performance case, and bought this case because the reviews for it were very good and it was relatively inexpensive. You can put up to a 120 by 240 millimeter on the top, and you can put up to either 140 by 280 millimeter or 120 by 360 millimeter radiator on the front. They have like slots for screwing on 140 millimeter hardware on the top, but if you were to actually try to put a 140 by 280 millimeter radiator on the top, it would interfere with the motherboard. So it's not like you practically could, and the manual doesn't say you can either. But maybe if you put just fans, just 140 millimeter fans on the top, that would work. Maybe that's why they're there, or maybe it's just like a leftover design vestige. Anyway, so if you put a large radiator in the front of the case, you're gonna have less airflow in the front, less intake, as if you just had fans that are airflow focused. Like if you put a radiator there with high static pressure fans, that radiator is going to restrict the airflow into the case. And airflow in a case is important because there are other things that need to be cooled besides just your CPU and GPU, like your RAM and your chipset. And so it's important that your inside of your whole case remains cool and the air can keep moving through there. It's not stuffy. That's what case fans are for. So if you put a big radiator there, you're not going to get as good airflow through the case, intaking in the front, exhausting out the back. And so it's better for case airflow if you put it on the top. And typically, you put the radiator on top in exhaust, which means you're pushing the air out. Although Linus Tech Tips did make a video with a MSI case where I put the radiator in intake, but that's because the MSI case had pre-installed fans that were pre-installed already as intake in the top. And this was just because the inside, the intake face of a fan is more aesthetically pleasing, and so that's why there's a tendency to like to put intake fans on the front, and then you would then correspondingly put exhaust fans on the top. So you put your radiator as intake on the front, and then you put radiators as exhaust on the top, and then you exhaust out the back. That's why I chose to use a top-mounted radiator as opposed to a front-mounted radiator. And so that's why I choose a radiator that's so small. But anyway, it's an extra motivation to go to custom cooling, because if I can get a hydrocopper, then I get a card, and then I can install custom cooling, which would then might help my CPU situation, and I'll have a graphics card. One of the biggest issue is the cost. It's like $700 to buy the parts to make a custom cooling loop. And the other is the logistics of making that loop. So my case isn't really the best for liquid cooling. You can put a 360 millimeter radiator on the front, but to do that you have to take out a panel. Okay, so you do that. EK's fans are better in pull configuration than in push configuration, so that motivates putting the fans inside the radiator, which doesn't look as good, but whatever. You put the radiator on the front in intake, you put the radiator on the top as exhaust. There are the two fans that come pre-installed as intake on the case. You can put those down like on the boundary between the power supply basement and the rest of the case. There are two 140 millimeter fan mounts down there. You can also use them as SSD mounts, but they can also be used as fan mounts, and then you can intake up through the power supply basement. And because one of the doors to the power supply basement in the case, because it's a good design, it has good reviews, is mesh, you can suck air really easily up through the power supply basement. So you can get intake through the bottom, and that allows you to substitute for the intake in the front. Because now you are intaking still in the front with a radiator, but a radiator doesn't intake near as well as just naked fans. So what you do is you move the fans to the bottom, suck into the power supply basement, have a radiator in the front and a radiator in the top. Use the bigger radiator for the CPU, and you put the radiator for the component after that component. So your loop goes pump, to CPU to big radiator in the front to GPU to smaller radiator on the top, back to reservoir, and then pump. That seems to work fine, except the problem is you gotta mount the pump somewhere. And I have only two additional fan mounts besides the front and the top of the case where I'm putting my radiators. Those are in from the power on top of the power supply basement. So now I'm using one of them for the pump, so I only get one suck-up fan. So airflow is not as good now. For case airflow, my component individual GPU and CPU component cooling is better, but my case airflow isn't that good. And how do I find it? I need to find a pump that will fit those two fan mounts. They are directly under where the GPU is going to be. Now the GPU is going to be in the top slot, and it's only going to be, if it were hydrocopper, it would only be single slot, so it wouldn't hang down multiple slots. But a 120 millimeter high pump reservoir combo or a 160 millimeter high pump reservoir combo is not going to fit underneath that graphics card. So I can't actually mount the pump to one of those fan mounts. So where do I mount the pump? I have no other mounts. You could theoretically put it, you downsize maybe to a 140 by 280 millimeter rad in the front, which is not as good because it's downsized, and then use that platform that you have to take out to fit the longer radiator, and just kind of rest the pump on that platform, I guess. So great. It's like, just upgrade your case and just get a really big case that will support a 360 millimeter radiator for the CPU. I mean, even a 280 millimeter radiator will be an upgrade from a 240 millimeter radiator, right? Radiator. So it might be worth trying to do, but the pump logistics is a bit of a problem, and the cost is a bit excessive to get that cooling up, get that custom cooling going. But something I'm considering. As you can see, I've already priced it out and looked at, can I fit a pump in here? Can I fit a radiator in there? And so on. Anyway, so that's all I wanted to say in appendix. But most likely I'll just get a 3060 first, and then that's just what I'll have until the next generation, where I try to do things like upgrade to custom liquid cooling and try to fit a pump inside that case. Maybe I could just Google where to put the pump in a Lian Lancool 2 mesh performance case. See if someone has actually done it. There's different kinds of pumps. There's like the flat pumps, but the flat pumps you mount on like vertical fan mounts, not the horizontal ones. So I might just have to do a small radiator in the front and then just kind of, but larger than the one I already have. That's the point. And then just kind of rest it on the platform. Just kind of let it sit there. Not actually mount it to anything. Just really lousy. Okay. And then, just for kicks and giggles, before I wrap this up, man, I hit a C second time. That was some good slow practice. Yay! Okay, now finally that will be it for now, I believe.